What's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are looking at different stances for kickboxing, Muay Thai, MMA. They could be long, they can be short, they can be narrow, they can be fairly wide. And we're looking at guards and how they correlate with certain stances. We look at the Dutch style guard, the long guard, the Philly shell, the arms down, how you can have specific hand positions that work best with specific stances, and the strengths and weaknesses of each. That is what we're talking about today. So martial arts stances are fascinating to me, the guards as well, because there are so many different ones. Now, in my opinion, some are absolute garbage. You know, if we start going into, let's say, I don't know, a Taekwondo one where we're really wide like this, or we start going into karate stances, traditional karate, there's not much use for these in modern fight sports, which means they're probably not really worth you learning, in my opinion. We're gonna focus today on the ones that you may actually be able to use in a fight, a real fight where somebody's actually trying to hurt you. And then the different style guards are very interesting to me as well. I've always been somebody who competes very well with this guard because I'm most concerned with protecting my head and making no mistakes, but other people do such a good job with the lazy arms down, or the Philly shell, or really long arms. Maybe both long, maybe one tight, other one way out far. It's just fascinating to me how everybody can take such a different approach to defending their head. So let's work from the short, narrow stances and elongate them, talking about the strengths and weaknesses of each. So first off, very Muay Thai style is a narrow stance. The narrow stance is necessary if you're trying to check kicks or throw kicks very frequently. The longer your stance goes, the harder it is to pick one of those feet off the ground. So the narrow stance is very good if you are a power kicker and you're focusing on the basics, front kick, round kick. And usually when you're in this stance, you see a lot of the guys, they don't have a super wide shoulder width, they go a little bit more narrow. They have one foot pointing towards the front and another foot off somewhere between 90 to 45 degrees. Now, as we already mentioned, the strength of this is being able to check and kick very fast. You can also adjust your feet very easy. It's very easy if somebody front kicks you to just take a little step back and regain your balance. And that is why you will see pretty much all Muay Thai fighters and many kickboxers fighting from this stance here. They just shift their weight back and forward. You won't see them very active, you won't see them bouncing. That'll come in our next stance. So if you are somebody who likes to fight more just outside of range, you know, if my opponent's right here and I just want to be outside of range and I want to be able to boom and throw big shots, this is an ideal stance for you. But if you're somebody who likes to move around a little bit more, you like to move in and out, sideways, get a little bit of angles happening, you're probably better off taking a slightly wider stance. So we come from here, we widen up a little bit, and the big difference for me is I take the back foot from off to the side and I disconnect my heel and I point my toes a little more forward. From here I find it much easier to bounce, but also to explode in, get a combination off, and then get out very quickly. This is a very traditional kickboxing guard for people who fight with sort of that Dutch style, and it allows you to bounce and stay active, but you can also just shift your weight sort of back and forward like that. The last stance, which was a little bit more Muay Thai style, and this stance we're talking about are the things you will see predominantly in kickboxing if you're looking at Glory or K1. Not everybody does it, but probably 9 out of 10 fighters at least will take one of these two stances, which to me indicate that they are one of the more practical stances to choose. Now from here, let's talk about lengthening a little bit more. From this stance here, I'm still very able to move. If I lengthen out just a little bit, but I keep everything square. I haven't turned my body sideways. I'm staying nice and square. The only difference here now is you may be able to gain a little bit more punching power. When you're standing with a slightly wider stance, it's easier to drop that weight and get more power into your shots. But it's a little bit harder to get those kicks up and maximize your power because just picking that leg up is a slower action than when you're slightly more narrow. So if you are somebody who likes to let kicks go predominantly for your fighting style, maybe 50% kicks, 60% kicks, this is probably not the best stance for you. But if you're somebody who's a power puncher who likes to let those big shots go and stay nice and low, then elongating your stance is a very smart, wise thing to do. Now from here we will see people take this shoulder width stance and they'll start to narrow up a little bit. They'll start to get a little bit more almost karate style with their stance. The shoulders, once I do that, need to turn. They have to turn. It's very hard for me here to keep my shoulders and my chest square, so I just turn a little bit. Now from this position here, I've made it much more difficult to utilize my back leg for a round kick, because now to kick, it just takes so much more motion because I've turned my hips in a position where the lead leg will be very good for kicking, but the back leg won't. The advantages of this stance now is it allows my front leg to be very easy to lift and use defensively. And because my body's no longer square but turned sideways, it's a little bit easier for me to block the body, making me basically a smaller target. If I face towards you guys like this, I'm a fairly open target. Once I do this, it's a little bit harder to land because you're not supposed to attack the back. Now from this stance, you could be somebody who just kind of moves like this. You just take little steps back and forward, but a lot of times you'll see the guys bouncing forward and back, and they're relying on their ability to bounce out of the way when necessary, whenever an attack comes. Out of the stances I've showed you so far, there's really no one that is the best. This is the one you have to do. You guys really have to try them out, assess what your strengths and weaknesses are in terms of striking. Do you prefer power hands? Do you prefer fast hands? Do you prefer lots of round kicks, like a Muay Thai fighter, or more side kicks off the lead leg, like a Taekwondo or karate practitioner? From there, you should be able to choose a fighting stance that you want, but we're not done yet because we have not talked about the hands. What hands go best with specific stances? Now, for the Muay Thai style, because we are staying fairly narrow, because we are standing just outside of punching or kicking range, there's not much point in me having my hands down here or way out here. I'm better off having my hands tight to my head or a little bit further away, so it's easy for me to check the kicks, block the punches, whatever it may be. Hands tighter to the head, to me, seems like the smartest decision. In this position, the hands are not making contact with the head. They're both away, but they're both not very far away. So if I need to draw them in, I can. But this style is very good for maintaining distance. If somebody moves to me, I can stretch my arms out and just maintain that range, which I already had. Once we change to a kickboxing style stance, we come just a little bit more square. We disconnect our back heel. From here, a lot of times we'll see fighters maintain this position. The hands tight to the head, just really snug in there, and they're going to be bouncing a lot, or they're just going to be shifting their weight back and forth, but a lot of times they're utilizing this guard, basically waiting for somebody to come and throw at them, deflecting shots off, and then going for counters. Or if they're the aggressor, they move in, they throw their shots, they keep their hands really high, and then they stay out. They're trying to minimize the amount of shots that break through that guard. That is the advantage of the Dutch style guard. The guy actually has to find a hole. If he can't find a hole, he's not going to land anything clean. Whereas with the Muay Thai style one, you make one mistake and the uppercut can come up the middle. You have to actively be reaching to deflect shots. On this one here, you're just anticipating small little movements to deal with these attacks that are coming. Now, from here, we move into a slightly longer guard. What I like to do on this one is I like to think one arm moves out, but the other one stays in here. What are the advantages to this as opposed to both hands tight or both hands away slightly? Well, number one, we have one side of the head that is covered. So I only have to really worry about this side at the moment. Number two, this one can act as a gauge. It basically allows me to know if the guy moves in and closer than this hand, I need to back out, or I need to do something to defend. This hand here also can blind him. If I'm constantly doing this, I can have this other shot come. It'll be a little harder to see, or I could have something like a front kick come down the middle, and again, this will just slightly blind you. And because my jab hand is already halfway out, it's halfway to the target, I can snap out very quick and make my jab seem almost twice as fast. This stance is very good for somebody who's a little bit more mobile, who's very good at head movement, because you want to be able to move your head because only one side of your face is properly covered. So anything coming straight on or from this side will either need to be deflected with this arm, or you'll have to move your head around. The downside on this, as opposed to the kickboxing style guard, is one big mistake. One moment where you don't anticipate what's coming, one moment where you blink and you don't see a shot and you have nothing covering your head. You're just eating a big, massive shot with no deflection whatsoever, which is why I do not utilize this, but many people are very effective. One hand tight, one arm far is a range finder and basically a jab. Now, less common, but something you will see very often in boxing, occasionally in kickboxing, is the Philly shell. The Philly shell is a very good fighting style when you are going against somebody who's only throwing hands, because you can move your head as low as you want, and you don't have to worry about anything coming from the lower body, any knees or head kicks. It also has the ability to utilize the shoulder to protect the jaw, and then now that I've wound my body up, I can unwind with the counter shot very quickly. It's a style that Floyd Mayweather has used for years, just right in here. He's very, very hard to hit, but he's always adjusting his head, whereas like I said, in kickboxing, MMA, Muay Thai, you have to be a little bit more careful about that. Another downside of the Philly shell in any striking style with legs is it becomes much more difficult to catch kicks because your arms are not in the correct position. If I want to catch a kick off this side, and the guy's throwing up to my bicep, normally I just come around and I grab. But now I have to come up before I can come around and grab. It's much slower. If I want to utilize a block, something like he hits me here and I catch and scoop through, I have to lift this arm up. I can't really come across because this arm is jamming me. So it does take away your ability to catch kicks. But the upside of it is it can be very frustrating for people. Every time they throw, you're moving your head. You can bank shots off that, and you can come back with super powerful counter shots. Plus the jab, snapping out, catches a very odd angle. As opposed to here where it's straight out, straight back, you can actually come under people's guard. And the final guard that you will see very often in MMA or kickboxing is both arms out long. Generally, this is with a longer stance, which we already talked about before. The guys are very light on their feet, and they're using both of these to pick off shots midair. But you don't want to let somebody close the distance and throw counters, because the chance of you being able to block is very, very small, as opposed to here where you just let everything come to your guard and block it. But with the long guard, sometimes it's very difficult to close that distance. Every time they move in, you just throw a jab and you move backwards, or as they throw, you get both arms up really high. There's lots of advantages to this, especially if you're a long arm fighter and you like being mobile on your feet. This hand can come up, this one can go down, vice versa. It could be here, it could both be out. You can move your hands around as long as you have a good game plan for when the attack comes, either exiting or moving your head. This is also a very good guard that you can use incorporated with a longer stance. I would not recommend using this one from here because you're too close. The stance here is for people when they're much closer. You're letting somebody move to you. Once they've moved to you, you're gonna get hit. There's just a matter of time. So basically what I take from this, personally, when I think about stances, is I go narrow stance, tight guard. As we move out a little bit further, I can be a little bit more relaxed with my guard until I get out to this one where I can do whatever I want here. The tighter we are to our opponent, the more aware we need to be that our hands are up and tight. Because a lot of times the attacker, when I'm in this position, he doesn't have to move that far. I'm right outside of punch range, he's right outside of punch range. But as I start going into this, I'm not standing just within punch range, I'm standing outside kick range. There's like an extra foot of distance added between me and my opponent. Now in this episode, I've already stated this, but I'm gonna state it again. You guys have to go out and you have to try all the different stances, all the different guards, and see what works for you. Try to be very mindful of the speed that you can get, the power you can get in your shots, and if you're training with somebody, being very aware of how solid your defense feels. That's probably the most important to me. If your defense feels very off. Like I can fight from here offensively fine, but defensively I feel like I get tagged more. So I don't bother with it because I have no interest in getting hit that often. I want to minimize the damage, not only to my body, but especially to my head. And a solid guard that works best for me is going to be the thing that will keep me safest. And my stance is just basically created around my ideal guard. That's the way I have created everything: stance, guard, and almost my whole fight style. I hope this stance and guard episode helps you guys out, helps you maybe understand what will work best for you or what will work on other people. That's something to understand as well. If you guys enjoyed the episode, please give it a like. If you haven't already, join the channel and get subscribed. Train hard, guys. I'll see you back here soon for another video.